how the Torah, the study of Torah, in order to know Torah deeply and to understand it and appreciate it, just move slightly either way, to appreciate it, compares the effect of Torah and or the interrelationship of the Torah and the neshama to mozin, to food, and that's due to the fact that the mind envelops the Torah within it when it studies, and encloses and envelops the inyan, the matter that it's learning in Torah. So the Torah, as it were, becomes, as it were, enclosed within the nefesh, in a similar way to the food that we take into our systems becomes united with the digestive system, and ultimately becomes, or very swiftly really, becomes part of our body and part of our whole makeup. And similarly, and when you finish your time in this world after you've studied Torah in this world and you go up to Gan Eden, so then the Torah that you studied here becomes a mozin to the neshama, a food and a substance to the neshama, provided that you learned it in this world in a oifen of Torah lishmo, for the sake of the Torah. And we developed on that some length in the last class, that he says, what does it mean, lishmo? Kidei lakasha nafshe l'Hashem alidei hasogas haTorah ish kefi sikloi kameshkosu b'pri eitz chaim. And we discussed at some length that lakasha b'sikloi, lakasha nafshe l'Hashem, that's connected with the idea of lishmo, because that in the Tanya terminology means fear and love of Hashem. In other words, learning Torah with midas shebelev, midas in the full sense of love of Hashem and fear and awe of Him. When you learn that way, then it's lishmo, because when you love Hashem, then your learning automatically becomes in the form of wanting to do what would be His will, because that's what love implies. And we dealt with that with some particular length. And now we go in the final brackets. At the close of the Perek, the Alter Rebbe says that mozin is itself a moshel, not just for something which enters the pneumius of something, but if we take it in a more, in inverted commas, technical sense, or in a more conceptual sense in the study of Pnimis HaTorah, then he says that mozin is the concept of oyer pnimi, of a divine light which enters the kalim of the receiver and becomes united with them, as we know in many places in Chassidus, that oyer pnimi means something which is mislabish inside the kalim and the pnimis of the union. So he said mozin in general is the concept and is a moshel for the idea of oyer pnimi, which means that when you learn Torah, then you take Elikus in the form of oyer pnimi, a inner light which enters you. Similarly in Gan Eden there that we were talking about, in the learning of the Torah, or the benefiting from the Torah that you've learned here in this world, is also up in that madrega, it's an inyan of pnimi. He said, "V'halavushim," and the moshel that we drew from the mitzvahs mainly, the concept of a garment, well, that is the inyan of a oyer makifin, which they are divine lights or divine illuminations, which are not able to enter the keli due to their great level and their state of elevation. They can't be taken into the kalim b'pnimius, so therefore they shine in the form, or they appear, and they enter and affect the nefesh of the person who's studying, keeping the mitzvahs, in a form of an enveloping light, not an inner light. V'lochein omer razal shetal Torah shoku keneged kol hamitzvahs. And therefore we say every day in the brisa from Masechta Peah, we say before we begin davening, after Birchas HaTorah, we say it, that we quote Toloshin Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, And so the Rebbe says, what is the meaning of that? What's the pshat of saying Talmud Torah keneged kulam? So he says that it means that the study of Torah is shakul, that if you had everything in one side, and everything, I mean all the mitzvahs on one side, and the study of Torah on the other, then Torah would balance them out. It's shakul, it's weighed up in a way that it's equal to all of them. Shakul keneged kol ha-mitzvahs, meaning that we had all the mitzvahs in the other, balancing part of the scales, then the Torah would equal them and weigh them out. Why? Lafisha ha-mitzvahs ein levushim lavod. As we saw, the mitzvahs are only garments. When we say only, but we mean they are garments only, putting it that way. Not only garments, but garments only, meaning their function is a one-way or one inyan function. They make garments for the nefesh, or makifim, like we saw. Va'atoiro hi mozoin vegam levush, that the Torahs are double influence in that it's the inner sustenance of the nefesh, because the nefesh takes it into itself in a oil pnimi, v'gam levush, and the Torah is also a levush la nefesh hamaskeles shemislabish bo, to the thinking or learning or understanding nefesh, the nefesh hamaskeles shemislabish, which enters the Torah biyuna v'limuda, when she's studying very hard to gain the meaning and the inner message and the grasping and the learning of Torah, then you've got both inyanim together. You have both mozin and also levush. Now we notice here a very interesting phenomenon that the Alter Rebbe says that the Torah is mozin, what we already had that, and he says also levush, which the truth is we've already had that also. Earlier in the Perek, we saw that the Torah, when you study Torah, you form a interunion of a most amazing sort, where two makifim sort of unite together in an inseparable way, meaning that your seichel is makif what you learn, but the Torah is also makif your seichel, and that's what he's referring to here. V'gam levush la nefesh hamaskeles shemislabish bo. It's also a nefesh to the thinking soul, to the understanding soul, which is entering it, or mislabish, being engarmented in it, biyuna v'limuda. What that implies, as we've said on earlier occasions here in this Perek, that when you learn something in Torah, then you surround the whole concept that you're trying to grasp. That concept in Torah also surrounds your mind. And that can be described in different ways. What it means is simply that no matter how much you attempt to grasp a matter and you're successful, and you grasp the deep message that there is in any given aspect of Torah, you don't really grasp it in the real way. There's so much which is left behind, and that is like the oil makif that surrounds, it's like the enveloping light that surrounds you. In other words, your mind surrounds the concept. At the same time, the concept surrounds you because there's so much, as it were, that you, as it were, leaving behind. And one could maybe give a module for that. There's a famous Torah of the Baal Shem Tov. But there's a pasuk in Tehillim, which we say B'shas HaBris. It's said in the Gemara in the Masechta Shabbos to be referring to the greatness of Bris Milah. That pasuk says, "Sos onoichi al mitzvaysecha k'moitzei sholol rav." I am rejoicing in your commandment like the finder of a great treasure. Like somebody who just walks out and finds a great treasure. So we can imagine how full of joy he is. That's the way I'm joyful about your mitzvah. So the Baal Shem Tov said there's a very special meaning to that. What does it mean? Your joy in a mitzvah, particularly in studying the Torah, is like somebody who finds a huge treasure. Now, if you happen to be walking along, and all of a sudden you find a huge treasure, then you're tremendously thrilled and happy about that. But you can't take with you the whole treasure. You fill up all your pockets and you fill up everything. You got to fill up your hat, and fill up everything that you can possibly do, but you can't take the whole treasure with you. There's a certain amount you have to leave behind. So therefore you have tremendous joy at having found the treasure and having got what you got, but you have deep inner longings and garguyim, as they call it in Hebrew, for what you leave behind. And your mind is aware of what you're leaving behind and what you can't take with you. So the same when you learn Torah, you are full with simcha, what you're grasping, but there's a lot what you're not grasping, there's a lot what you're leaving behind. Oh, but that's not something that has no reference to you whatsoever, but it remains a makif over you, and gradually as you improve and you develop, and so on, like the person finds a treasure, he manages to get back with a semi-trailer or a truck or something, and he'll take everything with him, or he'll take more with him than what he was. So as you gradually improve, you're able to bring that more also into our Neo Panimi. So that's what the Alter Rebbe means, that it's also, but he adds here, or he writes here, that makiv comes to the nefesh hamaskeles shemislabish bo. Why does he say the nefesh hamaskeles? Why doesn't he say lenafsho shalom shemislabish bo? So we can suggest, even though these inyanim are not known to us, why the Alter Rebbe uses these different expressions and so on. But the nefesh hamaskeles, well, that's a way of describing the etzem quality or the etzem makeup of the nefesh. In other words, the seichel, which is the ability to grasp ideas, well, that's an essential thing to our nefesh. It's like, as it were, a tremendously major and essential aspect of our whole soul system, which is called the nefesh. In other words, the ability to grasp and to enter the understanding of matter and of inyonim and everything connected with it is called seichel, or lahaskil, to begin to. Nefesh hamaskeles is a way of referring with a absolute conceptual noun to the nefesh. It's the nefesh hamaskeles. That's actually a participle. It's not really a noun, but hamaskeles, that which understands. But that's like an essential description of what you are as a mensch. You are a mensch because you have this amazing gift to understand in Yonim. So when we say a person has a nefesh, a maskeles, an ability to begin to appreciate concepts, progressing and developing the whole time, that's a description of the mensch in his very essence, in a way, and it's a description of the very essence of what his soul implies to him. So therefore, when we say that there's a lagush of Torah over the nefesh hamaskeles, well, that means that your whole being, your whole very essence of what you are, in other words, you become surrounded by the holiness of Torah. Now, when you surround the Torah with your mind, that's only what you are. That's your limitation. But when the Torah surrounds you, then that's the Torah's kedusha. That's the Torah surrounding, which is surrounding you. What does it do? It surrounds the nefesh hamaskeles, the very essence of your soul and the very essence of your makeup. So that when you study Torah, you become surrounded by the holiness of Torah, and your whole being, your whole mind, and your whole makeup as a human, become, as it were, involved and surrounded by the makif of the Torah. So, in a way, to a certain extent, the Alter Rebbe is now re-emphasizing the greatness of that makif, because for a large part of the Perek he moved away from that, and the moshel of Mozain indicates how great Torah is, that we're able to, as it were, digest the Torah. We can surround the Torah. Now he's re-emphasizing that there's always still this amazing union, that the Torah also surrounds you and is makif your nefesh, and it's makif your nefesh hamaskeles, your etzem nefesh, your etzem being of what you are. The Torah surrounds it, which means that when you're learning, not only you're just understanding and you're bringing into like feeding yourself with new ideas, but you're also being surrounded by a tremendously high divine elevation, enveloping light, which, without any doubt, protects us, guides us, and holds us within a certain holy realm. However, it's brought down that, in the great Sforim, that if you really devote yourself to Torah, then when you go around in life, you have a certain, how to call it, aura about you. Well, it's even brought down, I even saw it in a mind from the Rebbe Marash. I think I even remember where I saw it years ago. Well, the Rebbe Marash said that it's even like a guarding force on the men. For sure, when you do the mitzvahs of these levushim, they become like a protecting force over the Odom. The same here, this tremendous makif would be like almost a protecting power over us to guard us from improper influences or even from risks and unpleasant things in this world. I say it's part of the mind from there. Anyway, that's what the Alter Rebbe said. So that's why Torah is equal to all the mitzvahs, and because all the mitzvahs have, as it were, a very high but a singular aspect to them. Here in Torah you have both things together, both Panimi and Makif together, and you shouldn't think that that's a small matter, because he said it not only surrounds the nefesh hamas keleh, the very etzem, as it were, of the nefesh, but it also is shokul, and weighs up, as it were, all the other mitzvahs. There's something profound. Now, I want to stress to you that you'll find everywhere in Tanya that wherever the Alter Rebbe mentions Torah and its amazing effect on us as human beings, and the tremendous elevation that you gain through study of Torah, the Alter Rebbe always goes out of his way almost to stress and to be tremendously outstated in the greatness of learning Torah and its effect on you as a person, effect on your relationship with Hashem, and B'klal, with your relationship with those around you and with the world. Torah is the highest possible shleimus, and in many places in Tanya, and wherever the Alter Rebbe mentions Torah, he always says shekeneged kulam, even though it doesn't really need, it would seem to, in the purest of the simple sentence, to be mentioned that way. Nonetheless, the Alter Rebbe always puts in a reminder of that brisa, Talmud Torah keneged kulam. Wherever he mentions Talmud Torah, he just says shekeneged kulam. It's like a reminder that this principle, which has been written here, that the Torah has in itself these two aspects, and they are so important and immense that they're able to weigh up, as it were, all your mitzvahs. So it's a very amazing thing that to keep mitzvahs is that's part of the whole reason why the neshama came down into the world. So the keeping of mitzvahs is an amazing gift and an amazing privilege, and it's one of the tremendous aims of a mensch in this world. Nonetheless, when you study Torah, you, as it were, you're studying a general and all-enveloping entity in your life, which weighs up and balances out even what you do with mitzvah. Now, not God forbid to play down the mitzvahs, but just to stress to you the great milah that in Siddur you never play down a second thing. You only talk about a milah of the thing you're talking about, but you don't play down something else. So it's not chas v'sholom to say the mitzvahs are only this, but to stress the unbelievable elevation and greatness of Torah. And now the Alter Rebbe adds another thing, which this is something which also needs very careful understanding, but we'll try to see what we can do with this. Now the Alter Rebbe says, "Kol shechein." Now kol shechein is a fortiori. How do you call it? Kol shechein is kal v'chomer. Kol shechein is in Lashon Kodesh, the way we use the expression of the Yud Gimel Midas, kal v'chomer. Kol shechein is a way of saying kal v'chomer. In other words, a fortiori. How much more so is this great enveloping light of the Torah nimshik upon to you when you study Torah? He said, how much more so, which means even much more than if you just studying the Torah without this. He said, "V'kol shechein kishamoitzi b'fi b'dibur." How much more so if he brings it out into speech. Now, before we saw that there's even studying Torah in speech where you're just repeating things or saying tillim, that he doesn't mean here. He means that together with the deep understanding of the Torah, you also bring it out into speech, and you actually say it out either to your chavrusa or to yourself, or but you bring it out into speech. Says the Alter Rebbe, how much more so if you manage to do that? Shehevel hadibur, that the, as it were, the warm air of your speech, how do you call it, the breath of your speech, nasa bechinas oyer makif, the breath of your speech, as it were, becomes a all-enveloping divine light. Oyer makif, kameshikosu b'pri 8 Chaim, as written in the Pri 8 Chaim of the Arizal. So it's interesting, just by the way, that those who write the Mara Mekaymus in Tanya, they didn't write, for some reason they missed out that one in the Pri 8 Chaim. So I looked up in Torah in a place. I just happened to pick up a vibe in another place. I looked up in Torah and there, in the Mara Mekaymus, they bring it. So what's written over there in the Pri 8 Chaim from the Arizal, for example, why do you have to, well, not why, but when you make a bracha before a mitzvah, what are you, as it were, achieving? So what's written over there, that the Arizal says that when you make when you do a mitzvah, then be'ikah, that's in deed, right, in action. Well, that's the power of action, devoting itself to the will of Hashem. But if you say a bracha before you do it, and you say in speech about this mitzvah, Asher kiddishonu v'mitzvah v'tzivono, and you have commanded us to do kaf v'kach, then he said you're mamshich a tremendous divine light on that mitzvah, even more than just mitzvah the mitzvah itself. You mamshich an even greater divine light, which helps you to elevate you in all ways, and make the mitzvah, as it were, able to perform its function. That this makif that your mamshich through the bracha is able to. Now that's a very, very high matter. The Indian is that we have a klal in the Gemara and Masechta Brachas, that brachas ein mi'akvois, that if you didn't make the bracha, you still get a mitzvah, and you still reckon Lamaila having done the mitzvah. So it's mashma in certain places and siddhas. On the contrary, that's right, just how high the making a bracha is, that it's not sort of, how do you call it, preventative. Well, that's a sign that's very, very high. And therefore, it can't be preventative. You have to do it, but it's not preventative if you didn't. Why? Because it comes from such a high way, you can't really make it preventative. It comes from so high. In other words, it's mostly a very, very high makif through the union of speech. When you speak out, you make a very high makif, and that elevates. So in another place in Torah, and also in Okutei Torah, there's a few places where the Alter Rebbe says it, that when you speak Divrei Torah out, then your mamshich a makif, the power of the speech, brings down a very, very high divine elevation, and that's even higher than the elevation of the Torah itself that you were learning. Because he says, Kol shkein, how much more so? Well, that means that this must be even a kal v'chayma compared to what you were anyway having was makif you when you're studying the Torah, which means it's a very, very high matter. So I want to try and make it, understandable, just briefly. Also, in the same light that we were saying that the Alter Rebbe here the Alter Rebbe is getting very, very essential with certain inyanim. And he called the nefesh hamaskelet. Well, we said that refers to the etzem nefesh. Now, when we refer to the four species, how do you call it? Doimim, Tomeach, Chai, Medaber. Yeah, the four general categories of the creation. Doimim means the how do you call it? The inactive. How do you call it? The silent, or like stones, sand, or the sea, for example. Other inyanim, they're called domem. And then we say tomayach. Tomayach is the vegetational. Chai is the animal kingdom. What do we call man? Call man medaber. We should call man maskil. We should have given the name seichel to man. We just pointed out that seichel seems to be the supremacy of man. says Chassidus, and said not just Chassidus, but the original makers of this whole terminology in Lashon Kodesh, Doimim, Tzormeach, Chai Medaber, They say that the highest possible Indian to describe a man is to call him a medaber, to call him a speaker. Now, if we look at all the creatures in the world, except for man, none of them speak. None of them are able to speak. So there are certain things like cockatoos, birds. That's what Tammuz says about that you can teach them to speak. I remember when I was a boy, I saw one of these cockatoos that used to be in the possession of a certain individual, and he taught it to curse. So every now and then it used to curse him. It was really funny. If he ever did anything to interfere or he teased it, it would curse him. But anyway, that's by the way. So it's written in Siddur that that's just an accustomed thing. You can teach the bird to be accustomed to a certain movement of itself, but it doesn't speak of its own. It doesn't know itself how to speak. You can just accustom it to mention certain things or bring out certain movements in its body which will produce that reaction. But to actually speak is only man. Only man has that ability. So Chassidus teaches us that that's the highest of all powers. It's beyond seichel. It's even higher than seichel. And which means, and therefore, speech is so tremendously important. And it's put down in certain Sifrei Kabbalah that before you get born, it's decided Lamaila in certain heavenly areas. It's decided how much you're going to talk, how many actual letters you're going to talk, how many actual speeches you're going to make in your life, and you'll never say more and you'll never say less. You can't do more. You think so he's saying himself, oh, I've already gone over my that's for sure. I've already gone over my. So you haven't. You can't say more than what's, and you can't say less either. As it's brought down on certain sign. Why? Because every word and every letter is like an important thing. It's like a precious thing, and therefore it's not good to too much of it, and also to lessen it is also not good. So therefore we understand why it's brought down in the Gemara that nivul peh, saying dirty words or using dirty expressions or things which are not good, is such a staining thing. And the Gemara says very, very terrible things about nivul peh. Why? Because you stain this unbelievable gift of what dibur is. Dibur is such an unbelievable gift. So, what's the secret? The secret is that dibur is a combination of two things. Dibur is what we call hevel hapeh. It's like our breath, or like a air that goes out. So it's brought down that that's not just breath, you're just breathing, but that is like a voice. It's like a necessity to your voice. It's not the actual voice, which is created from deep inside your nefesh by certain combinations of certain elements, like eish, ruach, and mayim, fire and moisture and things of that nature. Create this thing which is called hevel, as it were, the breath of the speech, and that is a very, very profound thing. That comes out and carries with it like your whole being, and therefore you've got to be very careful once again what you say, because when you put into your speech, you put your whole being into it, so your whole being gets, as it were, involved in what you're saying, and therefore you notice when a person starts really talking, he gets sort of, to use the expression, carried away, and he really becomes tremendously involved in what he's saying. Why? Because there's this hevel of the pair is moichi, the whole sort of nefesh of what he is. That's what there's a posuk in Shiur Hashirim where it's written, Yotzo nafshi bedabroi, that I lost my whole soul when he spoke to me. Which means that he said to me something sharp and in the form of reprobation. Well, that caused me to lose my whole. I didn't know where I was from him having said that. So Chassidus uses that in some above and other places. It's brought down, and that's a sign that it's a very profound power And when you say something sharp to a person, you can interfere with their whole nefesh. You can be maval with them so much. Why? Because you've given out so much from yourself. A very essential part of yourself has gone out in speech. And that's mamshich, a makif, since it's such a special part of yourself, it's mamshich, like we said, your etzem nefesh, and it's also mamshich from above, a makif which is so high that it's even kol shechein, it's even kol v'chein, like every what you were mamshich by just paying attention. But when you speak it out, you get this tremendous makif which comes down due to the hevel of the peh. And the oisias, the letters of the speech, they're an extra thing. They also come from a high madrega, Shiur Tanya, here in Ageros HaKodesh chapter 4. The Alter Rebbe is where the oisias come from. For the moment, we're talking about the hevel hapeh, about the hot air, as it were, of the speech. That's a tremendous thing, and that is much. Therefore, it's interesting how one thing connects with another. I've seen it many times that I'm studying one Indian with the Bochum, and all of a sudden I meet up with something. Just the other night I was learning with the Yigulite in Iron Bay. So sometimes the other way around. All of a sudden we meet up with something over there, and I say, "Wow, wait a minute! I was just talking with the Bochum about that the other day." It's amazing how. So we have just been learning in Iron Base. You know, we have that shiur on Monday night in Iron Base. We've just been learning in Iron Base about this Hevel Hadibur. And there's 4 chapters over there where the Rebbe Rashav really goes to town about this whole thing of the Hevel Hadibur, and he points out how it's got the ability to be mamshik the whole pnimius of the bench, and particularly the pnimius of his koiches. You know, things like his seikol and his midos. For example, you'll notice that if you're really worked up about something, you really like something, or you're very enthusiastic about it, if you talk about it, you get 10 times as much enthusiastic. You start really going into it, and you really get carried out, and you all of a sudden wake up that you're